So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing the new Martin Scorsese film, Killers of the Flower Moon. But before I do that, I should say what I say to start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers. But prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you're in luck, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify and Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there's always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it. Killers of the Flower Moon. So as what he said, this is a new Martin Scorsese film, and if people don't know already, it stars the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro. I mean, they're the two big main draws of the film, but it also stars Lily Gladstone, and Brendan Fraser has a role in there, so does John Lithgow at one point. Loads of famous people in this film. And I've been very excited about seeing it, because I'm always excited when, you know, one of the movie brats from the 1970s is bringing out a movie nowadays. You know, when you get a Spielberg movie nowadays, I'm always excited for a new Spielberg film, because he's still making films at his age. And next year, we're going to get a new Francis Ford Coppola film, all these years later. And I feel the same way about Martin Scorsese. You know, I'm always excited when these filmmakers who made their names in the 70s are still coming out with new films now. I'm always excited about that. And Martin Scorsese is an incredible director, one of the best directors working today. I mean, one of the best directors ever, really. You know, Goodfellas is in my top 20 movies of all time. And I love Casino, and I love Age of Innocence. And you know, I'm actually somebody who quite enjoys Wolf of Wall Street. I know that film's been met with a bit of backlash over the years, particularly because the guy who it's about, I forgot the name off the top of my head right now, but the guy who it's about has now become famous again after that film and because of that film. But still, I enjoy Wolf of Wall Street, and I'm not huge on Taxi Driver like some people are, I've got to admit, but I like it, and I really, really like King of Comedy. That is a good film. That is a very good film. And Joker ripped it off. And so you get the point I'm making. I am a huge Martin Scorsese fan. I really am. I mean, I even like The Irishman, which he brought a couple of years ago. I actually quite liked that film. I didn't think it was one of his best films, but I quite liked it. And he was the main reason I was excited for this film. I mean, I was excited to see Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in a film together, directed by Martin Scorsese, you know, two of Martin Scorsese's leading men in a film together. I was excited about that, but the main reason was Martin Scorsese directing what I heard was a Western gangster epic. And that sounded brilliant in my opinion. And I was also excited about, well, I don't know if excited is the right word, but I was interested in learning the story that this film is based on, because it is based on a true story, and according to Google, the plot synopsis of the film goes as follows. In the 1920s, members of the Osage Native American tribe of Osage County in Oklahoma are murdered after oil is found on their land, and the FBI decides to investigate. That story sounds very interesting to me, and it's a story I didn't know about at all before seeing the film. So you get the point I'm making. I was very excited about watching this film. It was one of my most anticipated movies for the whole of 2023. That all being said, this film didn't work for me. I found it very underwhelming, and I'll get on to why it didn't work for me in a little bit. But first of all, I do want to talk about some positives. All the performances are great. I mean, you have Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in a film together, directed by Martin Scorsese. Of course, they're going to give off good performances, but for me, the standout was really Lily Gladstone, who is essentially the main character of the film. I think she is so good. She really held her own in scenes alongside DiCaprio and De Niro, and I think she's probably the most interesting character of the film. I really liked her, and I thought the setting of the film was beautifully realised. It looked like Watching this film felt like I was taking a step back into this period of history. This period of history that I've already mentioned, I didn't really know about. It felt like I took this step back into history because of the way the period setting looked. I really liked the way the film looked as a whole. It's a beautifully made film, and I thought the score by the late Robbie Robertson worked well in the film. I'm not going to sit here and say it was a great score, if I'm being completely honest, but I liked the score. I thought it was a good score, and I liked certain parts of the film. Like, I really, really liked the opening. I was sat there going, oh, this isn't going to be the film I expect it to be, but this might be a very good film nonetheless. And I really liked the ending. Everything in the middle, not so much, but still, I liked the beginning and I liked the ending. And I do think this was an important story to tell. I didn't know anything about it. I've already said about 3 times. I really didn't know anything about this story. And it is an important story to tell. And I think there is something very shocking and unsettling about the story itself. So I did find certain parts of the film unsettling. And I did find certain parts of the film shocking and quite horrific. And I think it's an especially important film to tell nowadays. You know, it's still one of those... I mean, I think it's an especially important story, should I say, to tell nowadays. I do think it's one of those stories which is still relevant today. And, you know, I do think it's well made. You can clearly tell so much effort and thought and passion being put into this film. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's awful. I don't think it's an awful film. And I can completely understand why people would absolutely love it. I completely get why. That all being said, though, for me, the reason this film didn't work was the runtime and the pace. I liked the first 15 minutes of the film, the first 15-20 minutes. I'm not sure, I wasn't looking at my phone or anything, so I don't know how long it was, but I liked the opening of the film. And I liked where the film was going. And then it went on. And then it went on. And then it went on, and it went on, and it went on, and it went on, and 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 it didn't ever stop. The film is 3 hours and a half. No, not 2 hours and a half, not 1 hour and a half, 3 hours and a half. Can I just point this out now? That is the length of the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, extended edition. Not the theatrical cut of that film, the extended version, the director's cut from Peter Jackson. And I will say, I watched that in the cinema recently. I watched all 3 Lord of the Rings films in the cinema recently, all the extended editions of all 3 films in the cinema recently, in one long marathon that started at, 7 o'clock in the evening and ended at like 9:30 in the morning. And the thing is, though, each one of those films move. Yes, they are however many hours long, you know, ridiculously long films, but they move and there's so much going on in them, and they pace so well. And, you know, the first Lord of the Rings film, its extended edition, is the same length as this film. And the thing is, when I was watching Fellowship of the Ring, I just couldn't believe how enthralled I was by it. And I felt the complete opposite with Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, I understand they're very different films, but the point I was making was, they're both the same length, and yet this isn't an extended edition. This isn't Martin Scorsese's director's cut of Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the theatrical cut. Really, the thing is, right, there's a good 90-minute to 2 hour, so maybe even 2.5 hour film in there. There is a good 2 hour movie in Killers of the Flower Moon, but it's lost in this 3.5 hour film that drags and goes on and on and on. And if a film is 3 hours and a half, it's got to keep you engaged, and it's got to keep the pace going, and it shouldn't be so slow and so dragged out. And I did feel like it was, personally, I sat there and I was really struggling with the film. There was quite a few instances, quite a few moments in the film when I almost stood up and left, because I was struggling with it, because it just moves at such this tedious and slow pace, and there are good moments, but they just feel lost in the end. I remember my film teacher back in college, and I don't know how true this is, because he was a bit of an oddball. I mean, I really liked him, but he was a bit of an oddball. I remember him saying to me back in college, where he said to the class collectively, he said that Martin Scorsese makes his films, you know, he shoots everything and he gets all these footage together and looks at all the footage he's got, all the principal photography he's done, and goes, somewhere in here is a film. And if that is the way Martin Scorsese makes his films, you can see in the past that it's worked quite well. Look at Goodfellas. One of the best films of all time, and in my opinion, and this might be sacrilegious to say, but I'm going to say anyway, I think it's better than The Godfather. Anyway, going back onto what I was saying, you know, clearly that method of filmmaking, if that's how Martin Scorsese makes his films, I'm not entirely sure, I just heard that from one of my film lecturers, if that is how Martin Scorsese makes his films, it's worked from the past. But here, it felt like he got all the footage and just went, I'm going to use all of this. And it's 3 hours and a half. The theatrical cut of a film shouldn't be that long. If this film went straight to streaming and was that long, I don't think I'd have an issue with it. In fact, if Martin Scorsese made a 4-part limited series and put it on Apple TV Plus, who were the producer of the film, who funded the film, if Martin Scorsese did that and this film was on Apple TV Plus, well, maybe not if it was a film on Apple TV Plus, but if it was a 4-part limited series on Apple TV Plus, I might feel differently about it, because you can have those breaks when you're watching a limited series. You know, Martin Scorsese has come out and defended the runtime of the film and said, you people all sit there and watch 5 hours of TV at a time, and, you know, I get the point he's making. I've definitely done that before. I've definitely sat down and, if you will, binge watched a full season of television in a day, or however many episodes of a TV show in a day. I've definitely done that numerous times, and so I understand the point he's making. But I will also say, when I binge watch a full series of television or in a day, or however many episodes of a television show in a day, I have breaks. I go and stretch my legs, I go and walk around the garden, I go and use a loo. I can do that at my own leisure. You can't do that in a cinema. You know, sitting there for 3 hours and a half in a cinema is a tricky thing to do, especially if the film's not engaging you. And, you know, there were parts of the films which I found engaging, parts of them, mainly the story, although I do think it gets lost in its own storytelling, if you get what I mean. But, you know, there are parts in which I did find engaging, there are parts in which I didn't find engaging, and I'm sat there thinking, if I saw this at home, I might feel so differently about it, because I can pause it and I can go and do whatever I want at the same time. Or if it was a 4-part limited series, it would be different. And I'm not saying this is a film that should be, I'm not saying this is a kind of straight to streaming movie, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, I think it's a film more designed for streaming. It's shot, you know, it's filmed to look like a movie you'd watch in a cinema. I saw it in an IMAX screening, and the screen I saw it in was great. You know, just looking at the film, it was a gorgeous and stunning looking film. And I do think it is made for the cinema, but I think the runtime is made more for streaming. I really think that is the case. And that's why I didn't like it, because for me it was too slow and it just was too long, to the point that I really didn't care about anything going on after a while. And that's a really big shame to say, because I was looking forward to the film so much. And Martin Scorsese is one of the great filmmakers. That's not even subjective. It just simply is. And whatever he makes next, I'm still going to be very excited to see. But whatever he does make next, I hope there is somebody saying to him, cut down the runtime. Stop being so... Stop giving him all this freedom. I really want someone to say to him, stop making these films 3 hours or over 3 hours and go back to making 2 hour to 2.5 hour films. You know, The Irishman was 3 hours, and I just was able to get through that because it was on Netflix. I mean, I know it didn't have a limited theatrical release, but I never saw it in the cinema. And so I was able to get through The Irishman because I watched it on Netflix. And I will say, you know, I don't know, maybe not, but if this film went straight to Apple TV Plus, I might feel different about it. But I really hope, if Martin Scorsese's next film goes to cinemas, and I definitely think it will, by the way, because he's a big advocate for his films going to cinema, I think if that happens, somebody needs to say, cut down the runtime a bit. You know, don't make films as long as you want them to be. Be wary that there are a lot of people that are going to struggle with this runtime, and I was one of them. Yeah. Again, I can completely understand why people would love this film. And if you're sitting here saying to me, or whilst saying to me whilst you are watching or listening to this podcast, you're wrong about everything you've said in this review today, well, guess what? That means you're right. And I really hope that people who are watching or listening to this podcast absolutely loved this movie and thought it was a masterpiece that so many people are calling it. And I can see why it would be nominated for Oscars. I can see why it's getting all the praise it is getting, and believe me when I say that I really, really wanted to love this film. I really, really wanted to even just like it. But when a film is 3 hours and a half, it is testing you. You know, Oppenheimer, that was 3 hours. That came out earlier this year. That film is 3 hours long. And it moved at such a pace, though. It kept going. And although it did feel long, it didn't feel 3 hours. It felt about 2 hours, at least in my opinion. And that is how you make a 3 hour film and keep people engaged. For me, though, this is how you make a 3 hour film and get people unengaged. Again, it has its merits, and I don't think it's bad. But, I mean, I do think it's bad. But I don't think it's awful. I just think the runtime really lets it down. And as what he said, somewhere in this film, somewhere in this 3.5 hour film is a good 2 hour film. But that's not the film we saw. And yeah, that is why I didn't like Killers of the Flower Moon. And I feel bad for giving it a rating. But I did sit through the film, so I'm going to give it a rating. I'm going to give this film a rating because I sat through it. I almost left quite a few times, but I sat there and I sat through this 3.5 hour film that was really testing me because it's really slow as well. And yeah, so I'm going to give the film a rating. I'm going to say that Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm going to say it's a 3.5 out of 10. You know, one thing I haven't really spoken about is the pacing of the film. I think this is a film which tests your patience. You know, I think it's slow paced, and I don't think it's as engaging as it thinks it is. I think that it's a well written film, but again, somewhere in there's a good 2 hour film. That's not the film we watched, and the film is so slow and it drags in parts, and it's got this same dreary and sad tone to it. And it's not enthralling in any parts. None of it really had that same oomph and that same excitement that Goodfellas had. I mean, Goodfellas, you're watching these terrible people do terrible things, but it's constantly moving and engaging and exciting through the filmmaking. And I understand Martin Scorsese is much older now than he was when he made Goodfellas, but still, it is the same filmmaker. And I remember watching parts of The Irishman thinking, oh, this is still that same Scorsese that we saw however many years ago. And I didn't get that in this film. And I'm not saying I wanted Goodfellas from this film, by the way. I don't want people misunderstand what I'm saying, that I wanted the Goodfellas of American Western gangster films with this film. No, I didn't want that. I just wanted the film to be more engaging and more enthralling in parts. I never really got that. And for a 3.5 hour film, I wanted a bit of that at least. And I should say the reason I'm giving this film a 3.5 out of 10 is because I do think it has a lot of merits. But the runtime just brings all that down. And every time I try to think positively about this film, I've got to admit, it's just, for me, deflated by the runtime and the pacing. It just, the more I think about this film, the more I think, why was it so long and so slow? And I will say there were other problems I had with the film, definitely. But the biggest problems for me were the runtime and the pacing. And if those problems are so there, you know, if those problems are so prevalent for me whilst I'm watching the film, then everything else starts to fall apart as well. It just moved at such a slow pace, and I struggle with slow films. I've spoken about this on this channel before. I struggle with slow films because, well, they're not for me. And that's it in the end. This film just isn't for me. If this film's for you, again, that's awesome. I don't want to take that away from you whatsoever. I know I'm going to be in the minority on this, and I'm absolutely fine about that. In fact, I came home after watching the film yesterday at the cinema, and I said to my brother, I didn't really like it too much, and he said to me, I can't wait to go and watch it on Wednesday and say to you that you're wrong. I really hope that is the case. I hope I get all these comments in the comment section going, you're wrong, this film is a masterpiece. I hope that is, because I hope that is the case for everyone else. I just really struggle with slow-paced films, and I really struggle with films that are this long and don't need to be. Cut it down, please. I'm still looking forward to what Martin Scorsese does next, and his next film is in pre-production already. You know, he's still going, and I hope his next film is an absolute masterpiece. I just hope it's short. Yeah. Killers of the Flower Moon was too slow and too long for me, and that is why I didn't like it overall. And so, all in all, as what he said, I'm going to say that Killers of the Flower Moon is a 3.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for the podcast for today. So if you have seen Killers of the Flower Moon, let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And I should say, if you are very interested in this film, go and watch it in the cinema, because I do think it is worth a watch if you are very interested in it. If you are very interested in watching this film. If you are just a little bit interested in it, though, wait for it to come out on streaming. It's an Apple TV Plus production, so it'll probably be on Apple TV Plus sooner rather than later. I reckon by the end of this year, if not early January, and I think if you wait for the film to come out then, you might get more out of it watching it on streaming. If this film just interests you a little bit. If this film interests you a lot, check it out in cinema, by all means. You may think it's a masterpiece, like so many critics are saying it is. But if it's just interests you a little bit, wait for it on streaming. I think you'll get more out of it because you can watch it at your own leisure. Anyway, though, that is it for me on my thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. And I should say thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As we said, thank you as always for watching or listening. And I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.